You're not the boss, but when you shift your posture, the whole room falls silent. You don't say a word, but every opinion bends a little when it's opposite yours. You leave a conversation early, and somehow the direction of it crumbles after you exit. You don't argue, but the one question you ask makes them question everything they just said. That's when you know you don't need to give orders, because the world is already adjusting to you. Carl Jung would call this a man who has integrated his shadow, a man who no longer needs approval, applause, or validation. Machiavelli would call it perception warfare, the art of control without detection. Together, they reveal the secret of every hidden ruler. You don't chase power. You design how others experience your existence. And in this video, you'll learn how to do exactly that, silently, strategically, permanently. You enter the room with calm intentions. You think you're composed, even confident. But someone interrupts you. Someone disagrees. Someone doesn't acknowledge you the way you expected. And then, something inside shifts. Your voice tightens. Your back stiffens. Your mouth starts over-explaining. You laugh at something you didn't find funny. You offer more words than you planned just to not feel excluded. You didn't lose power because of them. You lost it the moment something inside you reacted without your permission. This is not about confidence. This is about internal control. The silent war happening beneath your persona. The war between who you show and what you hide. Carl Jung called it the shadow. The unclaimed parts of yourself. The insecurities. The envy. The fear of being dismissed. The ache for validation. And until you recognize them, you don't carry them. They carry you. That's why some people feel invisible even when they speak. That's why some men defend themselves before they're even attacked. That's why some minds rehearse imaginary arguments just to survive their own need to feel significant. You are not being ignored by others. You are being ruled by the fear that they might. Let's be clear. The shadow is not evil. It's not weakness. It's not shame. It's simply everything you've denied, pushed down, because at some point in your life, you were taught it wasn't acceptable. Your anger, suppressed. Your ambition, hidden under humility. Your need for control, buried under the mask of passivity. But here's the Machiavellian truth. What you suppress becomes a weapon for someone else to use. Think about it. When you're terrified of being seen as arrogant, all someone has to do is suggest you're full of yourself, and you shrink. When you crave approval but hide it under stoicism, all it takes is one slight, and your frame collapses trying to earn it back. When you hate conflict, anyone who raises their voice owns your nervous system. This is how men lose control in meetings, in relationships, in conversations. Not because the world is cruel, but because they've outsourced their own shadow. And worse, they perform what looks like strength, stoicism, humility, empathy. But beneath that performance is a constant negotiation with their fear of being exposed. They aren't ruling situations, they're surviving them. And the room senses it. People can feel when you're polished on the outside but turbulent on the inside. They don't know what it is, but they know you're not the one to follow. So how do you flip this? You don't need to become louder. You don't need to become better liked. You don't need to win arguments or walk in with a resume of dominance. You need to become whole. Integration. That's the word Jung used. To take the parts of you that scare you, the parts you've ignored, the parts that embarrass you, and bring them to the center. You don't banish anger. You learn to channel it into stillness. You don't kill your ambition. You refine it into precision, your need for recognition. You own it, so no one else can use it to control you. Once you stop running from your shadow, it stops running you. And suddenly, when someone disagrees with you, you don't flinch. When someone ignores you, you don't collapse. When someone attacks you, you don't overreact. Because you've already faced worse inside yourself. Machiavelli would say, "He who masters perception rules the room." Jung would correct him, "He who masters himself owns the silence that others fill." Now, when you walk into a room, your presence doesn't come from charisma. It comes from completion, from the absence of chaos, from the fact that you no longer negotiate your worth every 5 seconds. That is why the hidden ruler never has to prove anything. He is not battling to win over others. He is grounded in a territory no one else can access, because he's the only one who ever walked into it. That's the power people can't describe. That's the presence people adjust around. That's the beginning of dominance, not through words, but through internal weight. You think people need to understand you, so you explain. You think they'll respect you more, so you clarify. You think being honest makes you trustworthy, so you overshare. And every time you do that, you trade your mystery for relatability. You sell power to buy comfort. Carl Jung warned, "People don't see you as you are. They see you as a reflection of what they don't understand." And that's exactly what most people ruin. They rush to define themselves, to prove they're good, smart, reasonable, self-aware. But the moment others know exactly where you stand, they also know how to knock you down. Machiavelli put it more directly. Once your values are public, your enemies know where to aim. And worse, once your emotions are visible, your weaknesses are public property. You're not seen as powerful when you explain. You're seen as reactive, predictable, vulnerable to pressure. And the man who can be decoded quickly is rarely feared and never followed. There's a silence that comes from fear, and there's a silence that creates fear. Most men go silent because they don't know what to say, but the hidden ruler goes silent to let others say too much. You don't speak to fill gaps. You leave gaps, and let others reveal their hand. When someone confronts you, pause. When someone compliments you, nod slowly. When someone gossips, don't respond. When someone demands a stance, offer a question instead. This isn't passivity. This is perceptual engineering. Because here's what happens when you reveal less. People become unsure. Uncertainty breeds projection. Projection leads to assumption. And assumption puts them in reaction mode, not you. They begin guessing what you think. They overanalyze your silence. They replay the one thing you said, over and over. And just like that, you are no longer in the conversation. You are inside their head. Let's get brutally honest. You don't need to control people. You just need to control how people interpret you. And that is what most people never learn. They try to control what they say, what they post, what they wear, what they show. But the hidden ruler? He controls what others see when he says nothing. That's what makes him dangerous. Because people aren't afraid of what they can measure. They're afraid of what they can't define. Jung knew this as the unconscious influence. It's not the words. It's the weight beneath them. It's not the gestures. It's the absence of leakage behind them. Machiavelli weaponized this. He'd say things like, "Perhaps you misunderstood me," or worse, or "Perhaps you understood me exactly." Then he'd stop. Because the moment you define yourself, you limit your effect. But when others must define you, they can only use what's inside them, their fear, their insecurity, their doubt. You become a mirror, not a messenger. And that's where real power begins. A room doesn't adjust to a man who explains himself. It adjusts to the one they're afraid to misinterpret. So the next time someone challenges you, pause. The next time someone asks you to clarify, smile faintly. And the next time you're asked for your opinion, respond with, "I have thoughts, but I'm more interested in how this plays out first." You don't owe anyone your transparency. What you owe yourself is strategic ambiguity. That's what Jung called individuation. That's what Machiavelli called manipulation. That's what we call quiet rule. Everyone wears a mask. The quiet guy in the corner, the charismatic speaker, the humble leader. We all perform, not because we're fake, but because we were trained to be seen a certain way. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social face we wear to survive, to fit in, to function. And that mask? It's not the problem. The problem is when the mask wears you. When being perceived as nice becomes more important than being respected. When being relatable becomes more comfortable than being powerful. When being understood matters more than being untouchable. That's when you stop ruling your environment and start negotiating with it. And here's the quiet tragedy. You think you're playing it safe, but really, you're playing it small. You become the agreeable guy, the guy who explains, the guy who smiles first, apologizes fastest, and speaks last, just to be included. You don't build gravity that way. You build forgettability. Machiavelli would never play this game. He didn't care if people liked his mask. He cared that they couldn't remove it or look beneath it. In every social interaction, a frame is being built. Who holds power? Who is reacting? Who is being observed versus being interpreted? If you don't build your frame, others will build it for you. And most people default to one of three masks. The harmless persona, always smiling, always nice, never a threat. The over-explainer, persona, constantly clarifying, proving, softening. The invisible persona, too quiet, too agreeable, too easy to ignore. These aren't humility. These are masks crafted out of survival, not strategy. And Jung warned, the persona is a necessary tool until you forget you're the one wearing it. You can be strategic, you can perform, but you must choose the role, not the other way around. That's where real perception control begins. You don't suppress the mask, you redesign it. Machiavelli would say, wear the mask that serves the moment, and burn it the second it no longer protects your position. You're not trying to be authentic all the time. You're trying to be effective all the time. The man who controls his persona doesn't try to be seen. He lets others build his image out of their own projections. When he stays silent, they assume he knows more than he says. When he leaves early, they assume he's too important to stay. When he speaks slowly, they assume every word has weight. When he smiles faintly, they wonder what he sees that they missed. And the best part? None of this has to be true. Because perception doesn't need to be accurate. It just needs to be consistent. The hidden ruler doesn't broadcast himself. He curates how others experience him. Through controlled ambiguity, through selective presence, through emotional self-command. He's not reacting to the room. He's shaping the lens through which the room defines itself. And that's what Jung meant by individuation. Not to be yourself loudly, but to choose which version of yourself the world gets to remember. That's what Machiavelli mastered. He let people tell the story, but he planted the tone, the color, the doubt, the fear. And now, you do the same. You speak less, you smile slower, you leave sooner. But somehow, you stay longer. In their minds, in their conversations, in their recalibrations. You didn't raise your hand, you didn't demand attention, you didn't say much, but you became the myth they now perform around. That's persona mastery. That's power perception. That's how hidden rulers rule. In every room you enter, there is a rhythm, a pace, a social gravity, and most people, without realizing it, fall into someone else's tempo. The loud one, the charming one, the reactive one. Someone speaks fast, so you speed up. Someone jokes nervously, so you smile more than you meant to. Someone challenges your idea, so you start defending instead of holding still. That's not confidence, that's entrainment. And when you follow someone else's rhythm, you've already lost the frame. Carl Jung would call this dissociation from the self. You're no longer acting from internal truth. You're adjusting to external pressure. Machiavelli would call it political defeat before the battle starts, because the ruler doesn't follow the mood. He sets it. You don't have to talk over anyone. You just have to refuse to match their energy. That pause before you answer, that slow blink when they escalate, that calm breath while they fidget. Those aren't passive, they're weapons. Let's break it down. What is the frame? The frame is the invisible rulebook of the moment. It decides who is leading and who is following, who defines what is serious or funny, who reacts, and who others react to. In weak frames, people beg to be heard. In strong frames, people lean in, without knowing why. And the most powerful frame? The one installed without words. You don't say, let's calm down. You just stay calm until everyone else recalibrates to your pace. You don't say, I disagree. You let your silence challenge them louder than words could. Machiavelli mastered this. He never rushed. He never argued publicly. He let his stillness become the emotional thermostat of the room. And Jung would say, when a man is rooted in his self, the collective cannot shake him. That's what people feel when you enter with frame control. They feel something immovable, not arrogant, not cold, just undeniably steady. The final illusion is this: you don't need to convince people. You need to become someone they can't afford to ignore. And the path to that? Own the space between your reactions. When everyone's joking, be still. When emotions rise, lower your tone. When conflict starts, speak last, if at all. Let your behavior contradict the room, because people are addicted to contrast. In chaos, calm is magnetic. In speed, slowness feels authoritative. In noise, silence becomes a mirror that forces others to see themselves. This is what Machiavelli weaponized: strategic slowness, silent posture, calculated absence. He understood that when you remove yourself emotionally, you stop playing the game and start designing it. Isn't about dominance. It's about gravitational pull. You don't command the room. You become the axis it rotates around, and that shift happens the moment you stop reacting like everyone else and start moving like you already knew what was going to happen. Presence is not about volume. It's about vibration. It's about being the still point in a spinning room. Because when the world moves fast, the ruler stands still, and everyone else adjusts to the man who never adjusted at all. Most people spend their whole lives trying to be noticed, to be seen, to be included in the conversation. They cling to the moment, afraid to be forgotten if they walk away too early. But the hidden ruler plays a different game. He understands that presence is more powerful when it echoes, that sometimes the most dominant thing you can do is leave at the moment they need you most. Carl Jung would call this a mature detachment, the ability to exit without emotional leakage. No justification, no guilt, no fake goodbyes. Machiavelli would call it timing mastery. When the room still wants more, you walk. Not when they're done, not when they've drained you, but mid-sentence, mid-relevance. Right before your energy becomes something they can take for granted. That's how you turn absence into intellectual hunger. Think about the last time someone left a conversation unexpectedly. Did you forget them? Or did your mind start playing loops? Why did he leave? Was he unimpressed? Was that planned? Did I say something wrong? This is how mystery begins, not in what you say, but in what you withhold when they expected you to give. Machiavelli never exited with noise. He left with weight. He paused. He left just after a sharp observation. He smiled faintly and walked out while others were still formulating their response. Why? because he knew that silence after your exit forces others to carry the conversation forward in your absence and builds your myth in real time. Jung would add, the self doesn't seek conclusion. It creates tension others feel obligated to resolve. That's what makes you unforgettable. You don't need to dominate the room when you're in it. You need them to keep recalibrating around your absence once you've left. So how do you master the exit? Here's the strategy. Leave early. Not when things fade, but when interest is peaking. Say less. Let the final words you say open a loop, not close it. Example. Let's revisit this when it really matters. You'll see what I mean soon. I'll let that sit with you. Don't explain. No, sorry, I have to go. No, I just remembered something. Just a calm shift in posture, and you're gone. And most importantly, don't fill the silence after you leave. Let it breathe. Let them feel it. Because that's the moment when they begin to realize you weren't just another participant. You were the axis holding the room together. Carl Jung would call it individuation in action. Machiavelli would call it strategic disappearance. We call it dominance through absence. You're not here to be remembered for what you said. You're here to be remembered for how the room changed after you left. That's why the hidden ruler never has to chase power. He never has to force impact. He simply knows when to exit. And when he does, everyone else spends the next hour, the next day, the next week, trying to figure out what just happened. Most people enter a room hoping to be accepted, to be liked, to be understood, to be validated. But the hidden ruler enters with none of those needs. And yet somehow, everyone orbits around him, because he's done negotiating with his own insecurity. He's integrated his shadow. He wears his persona with strategy, not shame. He shapes frames without raising his voice. And when he leaves, the atmosphere stays changed. Carl Jung warned, if you do not bring forth what is within you, it will destroy you. But if you bring it forth, it will save you. Machiavelli added, never show all your cards. Never fight battles where presence alone can win the war. You're not here to impress. You're here to create psychological gravity, a presence that alters space, without ever asking for permission. So now, ask yourself, when you enter a room, do people adjust to you? When you leave, do they feel the gap? If not, you don't need more power. You just need to stop leaking it. You don't need to speak louder. You need to make silence a strategy. You don't need attention. You need to become the kind of man they can't stop watching, even when you're not around. If this spoke to something deeper in you, subscribe. Because what's coming next isn't motivation. It's inner warfare training. The battlefield is psychological, and the man who doesn't know how to rule his presence will always be ruled by someone who does. You don't need to become a king, you just need to become unignorable.